so let's go ahead. We'll get into episode 8. Give our final thoughts, right? So, episode 8, right? We got Wendy and the Lost Boys, right? They're all now captured, including Nibs, right? Because like I guess she just got stunned, right? And she kind of quickly recovers. So, the Lost Boys are all together in their cell together, and we see that Morrow, who was captured earlier, is sharing a cell with Joe. So they are together in another area. Wendy uses her magical hacking powers, right? That she kind of does at will, right? She's starting to really develop these impressive powers that make her kind of even more, I guess, concerning or lethal with what she could do with them. So she unlocks Joe and Morrow's cell, and it allows them to escape. Morrow pretty much tells Joe, like, hey, if you want to get those kids out of here, now's the time to do it, because I'm here to burn this shit down, right? And I feel like, especially after what we see in episode 5, and I see everything that went through, like you could tell, right, that Morrow is taking this very personally at this stage. He's not mincing any words. At this stage, he just wants to get back at everything that's happened. He's tired of this shit, so to say. So you see Morrow. So what he does is he goes to the lab where he has this like kind of fight with Kirsh. You actually see that Morrow has the upper hand, and he's able to like break Kirsch's back, in essence, kind of disables him. But one of the alien creatures is out, and that kind of distracts Morrow, and Kirsh is able to kind of choke him out on the floor. So he's able to kind of do that. So Cavalier, right, he goes down to the cell to kind of have this, I guess, like evil character dialogue with the kids, right? Which I felt was so goofy because, like, I don't know what he feels like he's going to do for them. I guess you can make the argument that he just feels like he's the smartest person in the room and that shit's just going to always work out for him. But clearly, things did not go as planned because, the Lost Boys kind of break out, and they're now on this mission to go out there and kind of capture all the quote unquote adults that have been giving them problems. So that's what they kind of have them do. So what do you think about, I guess, for Cavalier's speech? Like, I don't know. It just felt kind of like weird. And I don't know if he just is like kind of losing his grip on everything at this stage. But I guess, how did you like his like villain monologue there?
I mean, it's very much, Richard II kind of monologue where he's just coming up and it's like, I'm going to bring down hellfire and destroy everybody, and everyone's like, yeah, okay, whatever, and they take him down and stick him in the cage. Which is oddly enough, that's what happens in Richard II also. So
yeah, because it's all talk, nothing, right? Because he doesn't have any like real things there. Like it just I don't know. It was kind of goofy, but I mean I get it, right? Like it's near the end. He's clearly kind of starting to lose his grip here. But it is just kind of goofy to see, like. How
but I mean, I've always got the impression that he never really had a firm grip on reality, because he's living that Peter Pan lifestyle, and we see time and time again he's reading from Peter Pan. I'm like, yes, okay, either this guy really loves Peter Pan, or there's something going on that maybe Dame Sylvia should have been treating him instead of the Lost Boys. I mean, because if you think about Nibs, I mean, Nibs is probably far more just than Boy Cavalier, really.
And that's saying a lot, right? Because Nibs is a little bit off the deep end there at this stage. But so we have all the characters kind of split up. So Nibs goes and grabs Dame Sylvia, right, the psychiatrist, brings her back to this cell that they're at. Smee and Slightly go out and they get Kirsh and Morrow respectively. And bring them back. Now Joe is actually brought to a room with the eyeball creature, right? The eyeball sheep hybrid creature, He's obviously in there because they want to have Joe become the new husk for the alien. So he's in there, and there's kind of this chase sequence with Joe and the eyeball creature, he's able to at least temporarily subdue it until Wendy shows up, and she's kind of there to save the day. Unbeknownst to them, right? This is where Adam shows up. Adam shows up and kind of renders Joe temporarily unconscious, and he's about to fight Wendy, and Wendy uses her powers to freeze him, and it's just like, oh well, he's a robot on the network, right? And Adam's a robot, right? I don't know if that was supposed to be a surprise or not. Were you surprised by that? Because I feel like they were trying to paid off like it was a surprise that he was a machine.
I mean, I kind of got the feeling when Morrow was telling that story about how he built his first synth.
Yes.
And the synth killed his abusive father. I was like, I wonder who that could be. Maybe the guy who's been with you this entire time.
Yes. I mean, even before that, it all felt kind of weird because it's like, this guy's kind of like always there, and it would feel weird if he was human, but you didn't really know. But yeah, once that kind of happened, I think they kind of painted it very obvious what was going to happen. But yeah, so Wendy freezes Adam, and that's that for Adam. And they also bring him down there. So you have who do you got down there? So you got Morrow, you got Kirsh, you got Dame Sylvia, you got Boy Cavalier, and then you got Adam. So you got the 5 adults down there in that chamber. Now, before we talk about how this ends, right, I want to talk about this little dialogue between Wendy and Joe, right? So when Joe gets saved by Wendy, right, and you see the little eyeball creature flees, there's kind of this whole conversation here, and I just was like, the whole time, I'm just like kind of rolling my eyes because I'm like, ugh, the writing feels like we're going through a dumpster fire right now because everything that's happening here makes no sense, right? So, Joe opens up with, hey, I'm sorry for what I did to Nibs, right? I didn't feel like I really had a choice. And Wendy's like, well, you know what? Aren't you there to help people? And I was like, yeah, he is there to help people. That's why he wanted to stop Nibs from massacring people because she's a psychopath. Like, the whole time Wendy's like having this conversation, I'm like, what point are you trying to make, right? I know that you're trying to like show like, oh, well, I'm not, 100% human, but I feel like you're making that turn really fast because as she goes on, she continues to like have these questions because she's like, well, you know what? I'm not human. Or she questions whether or not she's human. She doesn't really know what she is. She kind of talks about why she likes the creatures or the aliens. And she's like, I like the aliens because they're, what term did she use? They're honest.
Yeah.
Is what she says. And I'm like, what? Like, okay, like you could say,
but
like,
you could say, yeah, but you could say the same thing about a dog or a cat or
sure, yeah. Like, I mean, you can make that argument. I'm like, okay, sure. So you want to say that humans, right? You don't really know their intentions, and that's fine. But I'm like, okay, are we supposed to be happy that these aliens they run amok and they murder people, and that's supposed to be like what better? Because, well, you know what? At least they're straightforward about killing people. And I'm like, what is the point? What are you trying to make an argument for? And then, Wendy says, well, you know what? They're predators to you. They're not predators to us. And that's where, like, I was just like, no, that's fucking stupid, right? Because literally one of the Lost Boys was killed by one of them, right? So you are prey for them. You're not prey for all of them, maybe, but you absolutely are prey for them. So don't sit there and say that. It makes no sense in the context of what you're talking about when literally those flies murdered poodles. Right, so it makes absolutely zero sense, and like the whole time I went through that speech, right, it was just like stupid comment after stupid comment after stupid content, And it just made me realize how much little effort they went into trying to wrap up the show or try to do whatever they're trying to do for the second half, right? Or whatever they want to do for the future if there's a second season. Because everything that she said was just wrong. And I'm just like, who is writing this? Did anyone actually go back through and really go in there and figure out what is happening with this dialogue? Because it sounds so ridiculous. And then really it kind of just ends on this total random cliffhanger where all the adults are trapped in a room, right? She has the xenomorphs there, and she's like, well, you know what? Now it's our time to rule. And I'm like, what is happening? Was this what it was built up for? Is that this is supposed to be like the hybrids like time to rule the world? Like, what is happening? I just felt like the story was totally off the chains at the end, and whatever they were trying to get across never really got there to where it needed to be. So, Luca, I rambled on for like a whole bunch here at the end. What did you think about, like, I guess how it wrapped up the first season? And do you feel like, what direction do you think they're going to go for season 2?
Well,
if they have a season 2.
Well, if there is a season 2, they better address all of the loose ends they didn't address in season 1. That's all I can say. Because there were a lot of loose ends and there are a lot of plot holes that didn't make any sense to me, or there are elements that I wish they would have given more explanation on. But hey, hopefully season 2 will address all of that.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So, but yeah, so I mean, that is Alien Earth, and for me, this was something that had a lot of high highs, but unfortunately had a lot of low lows, and it just felt wildly inconsistent from beginning to end. The first few episodes, I was totally on board with, right? I'm like, hey, this is really cool. We're seeing all these characters interacting. We're getting to know them a little bit more. You're expanding on the lore about everything that's going on. You're introducing kind of like these cyborgs and these, hybrids, which makes a ton of sense to introduce more of that stuff because, these synthetics have played a part in almost, I would say, all of these films, right? There's some form of synthetic that has kind of been a part of it. So, I mean, it makes a ton of sense to take it to the stage. The problem is I felt like the story has always revolved around the xenomorph, right, or the aliens. But I feel like for this one, they try to focus it more on the hybrid characters, and they're just flat out not interesting. Like, there's not a single thing I could say positively about all the Lost Boys, except for maybe Smee. And that's really because he didn't get a whole lot of opportunity to shine, right? Wendy just kind of feels like, and I don't want to say the term Mary Sue, right? Because, I feel like that gets overused by any female character. But, like, she just seems to have, like, random abilities that nobody else has. Like, why can she, hear and communicate with the xenomorphs? Doesn't really get explained. Why is she able to, like, manipulate things and go on the network and do all this stuff? Doesn't really get explained. She just seems to have powers for the sake of the plot. And then all the other Lost Boys, they don't really develop or do anything. They just feel like they're flat. Like, you have Curly there. The whole time, all she is, she just pounces like, oh, I'm not the favorite. I want to be the favorite. And I'm like, okay, that's stupid, right? You're boring. Nibs, what's going on with you? She's sitting there just poking her eyes in episodes and like having some type of existential crisis. And I'm not saying that, if I had a bunch of my memories plucked out, I might act weird. But the reality is that unfortunately, we know, like, dementia and other things happen within, human people, right? It doesn't make them psychopaths to start to be like, well, I'm pregnant now, right? So I don't know what's going on with her. Slightly is probably the biggest issue with this because he just acts like a total dumbass the whole time. And he puts, everything into jeopardy because he just can't reach out to support, right? And I know people be like, well, he's a kid and they're trying to have him be adults and, adults do that. Whatever, right? It's still fucking stupid. I don't care. I'm standing on my, this is my channel. I'm going to talk about the way I want, right? So you have Slightly there doing that. You have Toodles, right, who barely was there and just kind of like died. He was at least kind of seminal. The only one that actually I kind of felt any like actual interest in was Smee, who just seemed like a down-to-earth kid that was just trying to be friends and be a good person to people. That was totally heartbroken by the deception that caused from Slightly. But once again, it's more of Slightly's story, and Smee's just there, than him really getting anything critical. The human characters, right? I didn't really care for any of them. I didn't really have any interest in any of them. Boy Cavalier is just another generic, like, eccentric, trillionaire, smart guy that does stupid shit. We talked a lot about Arthur and Dame, and, as I said, I still will die on the hill that, I wish that, there's a little bit more there. But, I just didn't care about them. And honestly, I didn't really care about Joe that much either. Like, for someone that's supposed to be there with Wendy, I just didn't care a lot about it. I think a lot that's just because Wendy's just not a very likable character, right? Like, this is a protagonist I'm trying to follow, and I feel like I just don't have any vested interest in her because she just seems to be kind of like slowly dipping into depravity as the story goes on. Now, I get what they're trying to do, right? This feels like very much you're, kind of talking about, hey, where does humanity start and where does the, kind of machine begin, right? So, it feels like they try to put in like Ghost in the Shell and try to put in, oh my gosh, the Blade Runner. Like, you're trying to put in these themes into this, and I'm like, it's not really that type of story, right? Like, you're trying to make this more than it should be, right? I came here to watch these aliens and to follow a group of people that I cared about their surviving through this and be able to defeat them, right? That's what I came here for. I didn't come for this existential crisis over a bunch of kids that are trying to come to grips with whether or not they're real boys or if they're machines. I just don't care about that. And I think that there's an opportunity for that to be a very compelling part of the story, but it was so poorly executed in the first season, it doesn't really make me feel engaged or care that much about the second season. Now, if a second season does come out, I will watch it, right? Because I'm a glutton for punishment. But I feel like whatever they're trying to do, they try to put in too much story where there didn't need to be. And instead of like resolving or like helping me understand things, I felt like I got more and more lost as the story went on. So, Luca, I will pass it on to you, and then we'll give final grades at the end.
I mean, I will say this, like, in terms of the story, like, it's not really something that I paid that much attention to. I was more interested in the visual aesthetics, and like I said before, like, I can definitely appreciate Noah Hawley just doing his best to do homage to the movies that came before. And as I also mentioned too, like, each episode is sort of like an homage or representation of of the previous Alien movies. Like, episode 5 was definitely giving props to the original movie.
Yeah.
Episode 8 very much felt like Alien 3. Alien Resurrections kind of gets its representation in episode 4. So I will tip my hat off to him for that. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the characters, they could have done more with it, or if at the least try to scale back the number of characters that you have into something that's more manageable, and then you give them the appropriate amount of screen time. Because when you have all these characters, you kind of have to juggle and figure out, well, which character gets top priority, right? So someone like Smee, we don't really know that much about, or Toodles, who who's here and there, and all of a sudden he's just a pile of nuts and bolts in a tank, right? I kind of feel like I kind of feel like they could have done more with the characters, but by having less,
Yeah.
So if they had had just brought it down to like 3 of the Lost Boys instead, right?
Yes.
Maybe that would have been a bit more amenable. Or maybe if they start out with however many that they had, but they kind of get whittled down as the series progresses, it probably would have made it more more pressing, right? Because then we have no idea of who's going to die, and you kind of develop more of an interest because you want to get to know who these characters are before maybe they might get off in episode 6 or whatever. But no, they end up surviving, and I just felt like, well, So why did you kill off Toodles then? Like, doesn't he get a chance to live? Like, why is it that Toodles gets to live, or why is it that Toodles dies but Slightly gets to live? Because me personally, I felt Slightly should have gotten his comeuppance, but he never did. And I was like,
Sure.
that's just bullshit, really.
Yeah, I agree. So, I guess one thing I will say, right, and I'm sorry because I'm sure everyone's tired of hearing about it. I love Kirsh, right? He's by far the favorite part for me. So I just want to one last shout out to Timothy Oliphant, right? Appreciate you in this. You made it very interesting. I still don't feel like I understood what your purpose was even by the end of it. Hopefully that gets disclosed in season 2. But hey, it had me always interested to see what type of thing he was gonna do or what he was kind of planning behind the scenes. So if I had to give this a final score, right? Honestly, and this is always kind of the weird thing, right? When we're watching a TV show, because there's certain episodes, right, that are great, right? I think it starts off really strong. I think, I would give the first 2 episodes like, a 4 out of 5, 4.5 out of 5. I think they're really good. Then you kind of, start to see when everything focuses more on Neverland Island, I start to feel like the quality goes down, and I start to feel like there's more 3s and 2s in these episodes. So, if I have to kind of like pace kind of something overall, right? Also considering that, I thought episode 5 was fantastic, even though maybe not super rich with the story or wanting to kind of continue things, was a great kind of standalone piece. If I had to give this a final grade, I would probably give it a 3 out of 5, right? It's really, to me, unfortunate that I feel like they got bogged down and maybe bit off a little bit too much than they could chew with what they're wanting with the story. Because I think there's a very simple story that you could tell that people really enjoy, that would have kept people invested, and you could have still built the lore and done other things. But when your main character is Wendy, and I just don't, as an audience member, really click with her, even if I can maybe understand her rationale or why she's looking at stuff the way it is, it doesn't really make me feel engaged for the audience. And when I have to sit here and like watch these kids do stupid things, even though they're in adult bodies, I still know deep down that they're kids. And to me, kids doing dumb things is not a good storytelling device, and you can't use it as a crutch for them not acting rational. Obviously, we talked about poor Slightly to death here, but he's absolutely the worst culprit with it. So I will give this a 3 out of 5. I think this could have been so much more. I think you had a lot of interesting things there. The new new creatures were very interesting. At least the eyeball was very interesting. Some of the other ones, didn't really stay up to it, but they all can't be winners, right? You're gonna have some weird creatures in there. But I just felt like there was just not enough of what people wanted to do, which is to just kind of see the xenomorph and some of these other creatures, and people trying to survive it. So 3 out of 5, that's what I'm gonna get. Luca, take us away here for the end.
I'm just gonna keep it very simple. It's 3 out of 1 or 3.1 out of 5.
Slightly more than me.
Listen, you had a lot of great pieces in there. You had great actors, you had great settings, the art direction was phenomenal. It's just sad that when you put it all together, it didn't quite work out the way that it should. So, Lee, why don't you go ahead and wrap us up here? We've been doing this for like over 3 hours now.
Dude, the best 3 hours I've had. So, but yeah, so like I said, I appreciate everyone for sitting here and going it through with us. I know in reality, when we kind of split this up, it's not going to feel like it. But yeah, we would have been at it for 3 hours. But I appreciate everyone for checking this out. I've been such a huge fan of the Alien franchise. I was so excited for this to come out. And I won't say that I'm not happy I got to enjoy it. Luke, you brought up some amazing points, especially about the aesthetics. It just feels so good. It feels like a lot of effort and time was put into this. I just wish the writing didn't feel like sometimes it went over to Wish in order to get some writers in here. So, I appreciate everyone for checking this out. I would love to get some feedback on people about how did you like it? How did you like the characters? What could they do and what could they maybe do a little bit differently in the future? And also, what do you envision will happen in season 2 if they get one? Because I'm always very interested to see, like, where do we feel like the direction is for this franchise moving forward, assuming it gets that second season. So thank you all for listening. Enjoy your holidays, and we'll see you in the future.